We have the new moon at 23 Leo in between Venus retrograde and Black Lilith, trine North Node and Eris, and sextile the South Node. So what this all means is the new moon is situated between two aspects of the feminine solar force again, right? The feminine can, again, be manipulative. And if we're just, it's important to be honest with the ways that we can be, even if we're not intentionally being this, it's in the unconscious, manipulative, demanding, destroying, whatever it might be. We all have evil and good, whatever that is, contorted and coherent. What are we feeding? Are we feeding this self-importance, self-centeredness, or are we feeding centered in selfness? That's the key.
This podcast episode is brought to you by Astrologer Connect, your premier source for quality astrology readings.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to your weekly astrological weather. You have just joined a worldwide conversation that's happening here every week at Astrology Hub, and all of our discussions are designed to help you find a deeper sense of purpose, meaning, and magic in your life. So hopefully by listening here today, you're going to walk away both with a lot of foresight about the week ahead and the different ebbs and flows that we'll be navigating, but then also that it helps you to reconnect with who you are and your place in this universe and wherever you're at in your life. So thank you for joining us. And I'm so grateful to be here, joined by Andrea Michelle Kennedy. Andrea Michelle is a beloved astrologer here at Astrology Hub. She is one of the astrologers that works on our Astrologer Connect platform, and she's just an all-around amazing human. So I'm really happy to be here with her. She's been practicing since 2012. We are in very, very good hands with her. And Andrea Michelle, let's start with that big picture perspective. What is the theme of this week and why are you saying it?
Excellent. Thank you, Amanda. So the theme of the week is the evolutionary intention of tension.
Ooh, nice. Okay. Tell us why.
Well, there's been a lot of buildup to the release of this current, Venus has been so prominent, right? And because she's releasing the Capricorn cycle and entering the Leo cycle this week. So, well, she just started it on the day before we begin this week. But there's a lot of aspects to Eris this week. And also when the moon, toward the end of the week on Thursday, when the moon really hits the midpoint of Mars and Venus, opposite Saturn. And there's just this theme that came up for me as I was prepping around this Native American tale, or it's a teaching. I don't know if it's Cherokee or Cree, but basically where the grandfather is telling his son a story of two wolves. There's a negative or evil wolf, and there's a good or it just, a coherent wolf. And it's about which one we're feeding. And that seemed to be a theme for me when I was looking at the aspects this week. And also the evolutionary intention of having something like having an opposite or a polarity to really, really put where we are in perspective. Because if we didn't have the tension, we wouldn't necessarily know whether we are orienting properly. We need some sort of a feedback in the tension. So there is something around what's happening this week. It's not all tense, but it's just, there's a lot of letting go as well as building up. And where can we find that in between space to hold both?
Okay. So the energetic intention of tension.
Yes.
And this idea of the two wolves. One is fear. That one wolf is fear. Is that right?
It could be fear. It just negativity is one, and the other one is positivity, but not like a positivity. It's like one is incoherence, one is coherence, one is evil, one is good, whatever we want to call it. But it's the dichotomy of life, the polarity of opposites. And how do we hold the tension of the opposite to bring us more deeply into truth? Because often we don't like to see what's right in front of us because it requires us to confront where we're actually living, not where we want to be, not necessarily what we think we should be doing. And it could be that we're actually doing much better than we tell ourselves we are. But if we're confronted with, as in the cases of an opposition, with what's happening right in front of us and we can't look away, it's just, these are direct invitations from life to have more of an immediate experience and be in relationship with reality as it is nakedly.
Mm. Where do you think distraction comes into this conversation? Because what I'm just thinking of whenever things feel really tense and it's just really uncomfortable in the body. It
Yeah.
just feels like, ugh. And I feel that there's this impulse to like get rid of the tension.
Mhm.
And we all have our ways that we can do that, right? For some of
Right.
us, it's like getting lost in social media or having a drink or talking to a friend or like, and I'm not saying it's all bad, but I'm just saying, where does that come into the awareness of how we're dealing with tension in our life?
That's such a great question. And I actually, a little bit later on in my notes, I made note of all the ways that we do, or some of the ways that we do, and some of them you just listed. For me, my experience of this human incarnation is to learn and experience ourselves directly, what the truth is in our own capacity and in our own wiring to do so. There is ultimate truth, but it is not accessible to us as humans. And this is one of the reasons why we're encouraged to humble ourselves to that so that we can actually be available to what truth we can access in the moment. If we're constantly seeking it or we're constantly not getting what we want, and so we just keep seeing something coming up in front of us and we don't know what to do about it. And we want to either change ourselves or we don't trust ourselves and we have to listen to what somebody else is telling us to do, which is going contrary to what we really feel in our guts, in our hearts, we want to do. All of these things are ways for us to learn about how we are orienting to truth or not. So for me, it's just so much about, you've heard me say it before on the Weekly Weather, Amanda. I'm a big fan of discovery through our human experience of what it means to be human. There's no rule book. It's really, that's the beauty of what the astrology chart shows us and the way that everything is moving, the symphony, the orchestra of the cosmos. It's enlivening certain aspects of us at certain times to illuminate where we have been stuck, where we are in habituated patterns, where we just haven't wanted to go, where we are focusing too much, and where we need to tone it down a little bit. So these distractions are all very normal ways of just trying to, in a sense, avoid what is true or real, because it could undermine our perception or our attachments to how we want life to be. So it's just this ebb and flow. It's this cyclical, hence the beauty of cycles in my experience, because cycles introduce the same truth in different ways, in different language over and over again until we become available to get it. But it can be challenging when we meet those and we divert our attention somewhere else, like you were saying. Yeah.
It is beautiful. It's like one way or another at some point, whether it's this lifetime or the next or the next or the next,
Yes.
we will eventually see it. And sometimes I have the thought of, well, if I'm going to have to see this eventually, I may as well see it now. I mean, I may still be open to it now. And then there's other things where it's like, no, I just kind of don't want to know that. So
Right.
I think it's also being gentle with ourselves too, wherever you're at, that it's okay. And you'll be ready when you're ready. And there's,
Yeah.
so you're saying this because we have a big opposition, I'm guessing.
We do. It's this tension of, there's Eris in the mix. There's Chiron also in the mix. There's this big yod at the end of the week with the sun at the top, with Pluto and Neptune at the base. We had Venus at the top of that same yod last month. And so there's something around the transformation of Leo energy, particularly. And I'm going to get into that a lot because this Venus and Leo cycle is going to highlight some things very intimately for us around Leo energy. So Venus just had her interior conjunction with the sun, where she's closest to Earth, moving fastest and invisible, right? This started on the 13th of August. So she's simultaneously releasing the Capricorn light codes as she and we in our feminine are receiving the Leo ones. So we begin this week still being infused with the light codes of this new Leo feminine consciousness. This is quite a big week. So there's nothing to do about this or with this. This is just about receptivity, to find some time to slow down and be still, because we are receiving on some level of our being. And the amount we are able to fully embody and begin to live depends on how available we are to receive. Because Venus is all about receptivity. It's the feminine. Receptivity, magnetism, allowing, opening, right? Not just opening to anything that comes, but opening with a sense of like still a place of my center, having some connection with our center. And surprisingly, it's like more people than I realized, and I didn't for a long, long time really have a relationship with my center. If I'm honest, it took me a long, long time to really find that.
I completely agree with you. And when people would talk about it, I'd be like, how do you find it? And how do you know if you're there or not there? And I agree with you. It's like, it'll often be after a moment of unconsciousness, usually after engagement with technology, where I will have a moment of, oh my God, I'm not even in myself. Like I'm not even in my body right now. Like I need to get in my center. Right. And so it's almost, again, like you were saying, through the contrast of experiencing what it feels like to be off center, it's easier to go, oh, whoa, okay, well, this feels in center, like I'm in my center, and this feels out of my center. And I think each one of us probably has our own ways of doing that. But like, or for me, being in a big group of people for a long time, like I can get out of myself and be engaged in the others. And then there is this moment of like, oh, wow, I need to get back in myself. Sometimes just like stretching or breathing or stopping is enough to enable that.
Exactly. Right? And that's the dance of relationship and relating and the opposition. Because sometimes the opposition, the reason why we blame or get angry or divert is because it's confronting us with how much we don't really have ourselves unconsciously. And so the dance of relating is how can I be in me and you be you and take ownership and sovereignty? Not an easy thing. And so this is, again, like you said, if we're gentle with ourselves and we just recognize it's more, for me, it's more potent to just be honest with where I am and where I'm not, because the honesty of it literally opens the door to allowing the possibility of more of my life force to come through. It's simple, but the simplicity sometimes scares us, or we think it's not enough. And we go into complexity again or complicate things.
But that's another way to distract.
Exactly.
Because we go right up into our head and it's like, oh, well, let me figure it out. And let me look up a technique, or let me do a practice. It's like, well, it sometimes really doesn't have to be that complicated. And the more we overthink it, the less we're actually in our center and in our body. So
exactly,
like you said, this dance.
Hi, everyone. My name is Laura. I'm the Director of Fulfillment here at Astrology Hub, and we're gearing up for something so special. The Health, Wealth, and Fulfillment Workshop Series featuring world-class astrologers Georgia Stathis, Judith Hill, and Michael Bryan. Combined, these teachers have over 100 years of experience. If you'd like to join as a student and learn some of the most hands-on techniques for bringing more health, wealth, and fulfillment into your life, join us at the waitlist at astrologyhub.com/workshop waitlist. Hope to see you there.
Okay, so let's walk through the days and help us understand like I said in the beginning, the ebbs and flows of the energy that we'll be working with.
Okay. So Monday the 14th, we are still in the inception phase of this new Venus cycle. And the sun So the Venus cycle with the sun, and the sun is our solar life force and our local solar intelligence. It's our local star, right? And we forget that sometimes. Sometimes we get too enamored with the stars that are out there, which is wonderful, but we forget that the sun is our local star, right? It's pretty freaking cool. So, and Venus is our bodies and our values, how we feel safe, and our love. So love here is uniting with consciousness to bring awareness to the limiting beliefs of what love feels like. And consciousness unites with love to manifest in myriad forms to speak to each one of us uniquely, the level we are available. And this is one way authentic love, in my experience and opinion, manifests through a human being. Where the sun is in our charts, by sign, house, and aspect, is the centralizing force of our being and our life force. It possesses all the life force and codes that we need to invigorate and illuminate all of the aspects of ourselves. So it's a really big deal when the sun and the planet start a whole new cycle,
Okay.
especially in inner.
Can you make that make that tangible? I'm happy to use Capricorn sun as an example. But so what do you mean by where the sun is the centralizing force of your being? Like, what does that mean?
Yes. So the sun is is how we individuate in the Carl Jung term of individuation. For me, it's the Leo and Aquarius axis, and the sun and Uranus are very much about individualizing. And basically the individuating function is to illuminate and bring consciousness to all aspects of the psyche indicated by the asteroids and planets and things of that nature. So that's why you hear me and some other folks emphasizing cycles, especially heliacal cycles, when planets are in relationship to the sun, and taking that into account, because that talks about the deeper purpose of our unique wiring by sign, house, and aspect of a planet. Its collective purpose, our gifts as they manifest through that planet, it's where it is in its phase in the cycle with relationship to the sun that indicates how our gifts are meant to be given to the collective, how we are wired to be uniquely giving manifesting our gifts to other people. So for Capricorn sun, Capricorn is the energy that vitalizes everything in the chart, in your chart, regardless of what other signs it is. The sun contains everything in it. The stars are, in some ways, people talk about in some esoteric traditions, the stars are enlightened beings, right? So the flavor of the sun, or the consciousness of the sign in which we were born, is a particular wavelength of consciousness that is the centralizing energy that informs everything else. So for you, this Capricorn, sovereignty, leadership, and for you, especially as a woman and the strong woman you are, I always talk about Saturn and our Capricorn in relationship to Cancer as refecundating the earth, refecundating the Capricorn energy that has been, in a lot of ways, been dried out by the patriarchy. But at its core, Capricorn is a feminine energy. It is feminine leadership. It's the capacity to be caring and kind and direct and create systems that last, that have longevity. And it looks beyond my personal needs and wants to the future generation. So, yeah.
So each person can look at their sun. I love how you keep using, in the beginning, you kept using this term light codes. It's like, ooh, light codes. That's awesome. So if the sun is a sentient, conscious being, the sun has many facets. One wavelength of consciousness that it might emit would be your sign. So whatever your sun's sign is the consciousness wavelength of the sun as it's showing up in your life.
Yes.
And that's sort of like what you're saying, is that's sort of like the centralizing principle that everything else is working around in your chart.
Exactly. It brings it literally to earth.
Wow.
It down. Yes.
Wow. Beautiful. Okay, that's helpful. I mean, we definitely like. I mean, the sun sign can get totally poo pooed in astrology. It's like,
Exactly.
sun sign, it's like, but you're right. Like, actually, I was speaking to my nephew, who is skeptical. He's an engineer. He's brilliant. He's super funny and smart and adorable, and he's 17. And so I started talking astrology, and he's like, "Are you talking about like that?" Like, and he was doing like the movement. I'm like, "Yes." I'm like, "Let me just talk with you at some point and see if you understand what I'm saying, because you're a smart guy. Like, I think you'll get it. But I'd love to hear if I can like translate it for you in a way you understand." So we were talking, and I started with the sun, because I was like, look at the influence the sun has on our lives. Like, you go to sleep when the sun goes away. You wake up when the sun's out. The sun literally impacts the entire way we live on this planet. And then the moon, so I went through, but I'm like, but if those ones have impact, why wouldn't Venus, and why wouldn't Uranus, and why wouldn't Jupiter? Like, it doesn't really make sense that they would have no impact, right? So this is where we started. And it was interesting to start with the sun itself, because you're right. It's like the most obvious star that impacts us profoundly.
Exactly. And it's like bringing it back to that fundamental basis excites me now, because I think we get more bang from our buck when we are really just working with the fundamentals, or a relationship with one planet in relationship with the sun. It's this whole hologram right there. It's so interesting.
Amazing. So this is Monday. We talked about
Monday.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So Moon is in Leo with Juno at 29 Cancer, opposing Pluto retrograde at 28 Capricorn, and squaring the nodal axis and Eris retrograde. So just a quick note about Eris here. It felt important to bring this in. For 10 days in June 2025, she crosses from south to north declination. Since April of 2022, she's been at zero declination and change. Zero declination is exact on the celestial equator. The celestial equator is a form of measurement that measures distance of planets above or below the equator of the Earth projected in space. And for me, the declination is centered around literally the Earth's solar plexus, and correlates with our deeper, more personal habits and visceral experiences, versus the ecliptic, which is more our social and interpersonal connections or orientation. Okay. So this deep, deep changer, Eris, on the Earth's solar plexus since 2022, but precisely for 10 days, crossing from, I think she's cutting from south to north, is huge. So for me, there's a subterranean revolution or evolution happening, or an involution that needs to be made conscious to balance the evolutionary forces. So for me, Eris is collectively bringing us an opportunity to rewire the polarities of chaos versus entropy into the alchemy of instinct and complexity. And this is complexity in terms of natural law complexity, not over complexifying from our minds. The natural intelligence of like fractals. We can think of it as fractals. Okay. I know this is a mouthful. And if this doesn't make sense to anybody, please just drop it. But if it does feel like it's activating something in you, great. So this moon is a balsamic moon. So a level of deep cleansing is available to us when we acknowledge and transmute another layer of attachments to hidden power dynamics and self-righteousness. So with Venus invisible, there might be great disruptions in relationships of all kinds this week, and maybe starting with the week prior. Perhaps something in the news will show up about more corruption of spiritual leaders or heads of state or things of that nature, like scandals. Very potent time to ask the question inwardly, where we have expectations of others to go first or do it for me that are in effect, which really abnegates choice. Okay. So that's Monday. I know it's there's a lot going on. It's a powerful week again. I always get these powerful weeks, which is fun. So Tuesday, the moon applies to Venus retrograde and Black Moon Lilith is with the sun. So more of our shadow feminine is being illuminated before a new round of purging can happen. So examples of the feminine shadow are waiting, having expectations, manipulation, acquiescing, which is again it's not empowered, it's acquiescing to something, diminishing, or castration. That's a heavy word. We're at the end of the Cancer lunation, which started with the nodes at the end of Taurus and Scorpio, which have now progressed into Aries and Libra. So this whole new Venus cycle is not all wine and roses and feminine empowerment. Venus is the ruler of the South node now. And for the next 19 months, this is the node associated with releasing, purging, and our habituated things that we are unconscious of generally. So Black Moon Lilith prominent at the start of this Venus cycle is a mixed blessing. We have the potential to own more of our feminine power and love if we are willing to courageously acknowledge where the shadow feminine lives in us, again, women and men. And I'm just going to put this out there, one shadow of Leo can be narcissism. Where is self-importance arising, in effect, evolutionarily to be loved, to show us where we don't have our center, as we talked about before, because the only way narcissism can develop is when we are not centered in ourselves, when we need validation from other people, when we need to feel important or we need to be associated with important people. That's where somewhere in us we feel we are lacking, which is not true, but it's something that lives in us. Yeah.
Okay, I need to ask you this question about the feminine. So you're talking about feminine power and love, and you're talking about the feminine shadow.
Yeah.
Where do you see the biggest distortion of the idea of feminine power? Like do you have experience of it? Does it show up? Because I feel there's like a slight distortion that happens quite a bit where we interpret the term feminine power to mean something that in my humble opinion is not what it means. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yes, so good. Because we are so valenced through conditioning to the masculine mode of orienting, we use a masculine lens to see feminine power.
Yes.
So feminine power is something that is, unfortunately, you're bringing up an excellent point. It is occluded to us. It's literally something that we each need to discover it on our own. Venus is she's interiorizing. She's an inner planet. So she wants us to have our own experience, and she's retrograde now, which is doubly interiorizing. So this is really, really a focal point of getting inward, discovering, maybe making this whole Venus cycle, but especially during the retrograde period of when she's really, really fast and closest to earth and most visceral, doing some sort of gentle practices of discovering where is my center? What does it look like? Where does it feel like? If you don't know where it is, beautiful. That an admission of I don't know what it is or where it is yet is you being honest and kind with yourself, being just where you're at. That's the humanness that I keep talking about. That's the humility, which actually forges a deeper courage. So what feminine power is for me is being available to be vulnerable, and tender. And when we're connected with our center, in a feminine potency, in our feminine power, there is a sense of tenderness, sometimes even sadness. Not all the time, but sadness is the acknowledgement, the personal acknowledgement of the condition of being a human. And that it is so much more than we know, or we tell ourselves, or what we've been taught, or we believe in inwardly in our bones. The feminine it's welcoming the tenderness. It's welcoming our experience to the extent we are able, without judging, without trying to fix it. To me, that is feminine empowerment, because the feminine is welcoming. The masculine needs to cut things out, but we need both. We need the feminine capacity to recognize how much we have been divested from power, which is subtle. Power is not something that we have to wield or engage or prove.
Ooh, yes. I love what you just shared. And in my experience, because feminine power is a little less tangible and less obvious, like you just said. The other day, I had an experience of another nephew, and this nephew is 14, and he had been teased by someone on his football team, and he, to me, modeled feminine energy and its strength by having a very vulnerable conversation with a male counterpart on a football team. I mean, this doesn't normally happen, right? But he was encouraged by his father to just tell him how it made him feel. Hey, when you said that about me, this is how it felt. The two ended up bonding, and the young man, the other 14-year-old, said, I got you. Like, I am so sorry. I had no idea. We're going to be teammates for life. We're going to be friends. I mean, they did the other thing, so here are like two, very masculine young men exhibiting what to me is the strength of the feminine.
Yeah, no, that's good. And you bring it down to these earthly experiences that are just that's so good that you do that so well and so quickly. But yeah, it's less tangible. It's just, it manifests spontaneously. Masculine power does too, but it's just it's more inclusive. It's relational. It doesn't exclude. And sometimes we need to exclude. Sometimes we absolutely do. But feminine power is, especially Leo feminine power that we're entering here. It is the power to shine my light, to be who and what I am, and engage courageously from my own center, even if it is going to be contrary to or challenge some relationships that I've known, the status quo, even if it means I'm going to be swimming upstream for a while, because my central force, my life force intelligence is I'm intimate Venus, more with me and what is for me to do, my way of doing it, which when I'm doing it authentically my way, I am engaging with others. There's a reciprocity there. I am also listening to my outer environment.
Beautiful. Okay, so we're going to have opportunity to work on this aspect of ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. So Wednesday, I can't believe we're just at Wednesday, August 16th, we have the new moon at 23 Leo in between Venus retrograde and Black Moon Lilith, trine North Node and Eris, and sextile the South Node. So what this all means is the new moon is situated between two aspects of the feminine solar force again, right? So this new moon highlights that Native American story that I was sharing, right? Because Black Moon Lilith isn't all evil or bad, but it can be. The feminine can, again, be manipulative. And it's important to be honest with the ways that we can be, even if we're not intentionally being this, it's in the unconscious, manipulative, demanding, destroying, whatever it might be. The Native American story of the two wolves. We all have evil and good, whatever that is, contorted and coherent. What are we feeding? It's important to become more conscious of, especially this lunation, but also, I would say, because this is when Venus is still invisible, before she's had her heliacal rise, this whole Leo cycle in the 19 months of the Venus Leo cycle. What are we feeding? Are we feeding this self-importance, self-centeredness, or are we feeding centered in selfness? That's the key. And this moon is highlighting this as well. So Thursday, August 17th, the moon activates the Mars and Venus midpoint in Virgo as it opposes Saturn retrograde in Pisces. So Venus is still invisible and now a morning star, and Mars is dimming rapidly and an evening star. So we've got the feminine about to rise and the masculine about to go away. And the moon is right between the two. So the moon on their midpoint at the start of the lunar cycle introduces us once again to the reality of cycles and the journey of becoming. And I see this as like a composting, that in between that liminal space, I'm not quite there yet. I'm not quite gone from where I was. And that composting is a necessary stage between dissolution and rebirth. It's choosing to remain present to the natural, invisible, and indefinable dissolution of all manner of inner and outer systems, Saturn, that nourishes the soil of inner freedom and opens us into the preciousness of experiencing the implicit intelligence, the implicit intelligent order that is beyond our control. I'll say that again. That's kind of a mouthful. But it's when we can stay in that center point, which the tension of opposites, the place that relieves the tension is in our center. That's the only place that can really relieve the tension. Doesn't mean we still won't be uncomfortable, but we'll be able to hold ourselves in being more comfortable. Being truly in our center means we're not taking things personally. We can feel what's happening, but we're not taking it personally. So when we can do that, we are nourishing the soil of sovereignty and freedom. And again, opening us to the preciousness of experiencing intelligence beyond our control and beyond what we are orchestrating ourselves. So, and this is the same thing, like when we're digesting our food, we need to participate in that. If we eat unconsciously and we get indigestion because we're not really present when we're eating, or, so it's like, and there's something also about with Saturn and being ruling Pluto in Capricorn here at, I think, 28 degrees now of Capricorn retrograde. What is it that we've been consuming? What stories have we been fed by systems that are broken and don't work, that don't have our best interests necessarily at heart, around what is good for us? And where have we bought into it or ingested it without question? So these stories that might seem innocuous, but we're ingesting these substances, physical, mental, emotional, psychic, that actually leaches the vital nutrients and life force from us. So because, and this is a little bit of a separate thing, but Mars is ruling the North Node and Mars is in Virgo, very much associated with the gut. Trusting our guts, aligning our choice with our guts too, is a big, big theme for the whole Aries Libra cycle. And so I have a feeling that we might have more inflammation physically in our bodies that start to show us again where in our physical bodies we are out of whack and not in alignment. So Friday, August 18th, the Virgo moon trines Jupiter in Taurus and then meets up with Pallas Athena, Mercury, and Mars, and finally trines Uranus. So the moon is still very early in the cycle, and early moons are still waking up, so to speak. So there is still a strong draw to stay cozy in the state of potential. The moon here is triggering all these aspects and will illustrate whether any automatic need to maintain control of our perceptions of reality will supersede our choice to be honest with how well situated we are or not to meet the challenges of the unexpected, Uranus.
Can you explain that a little more?
Yeah. So we are meeting up with where automatic assumptions might be preceding the availability for new insight, the availability for a new perspective on reality. And the way that we get there is to really discover with Virgo the accuracy of whether I'm kind of just running on autopilot. I mean, this is always good to do, but this day specifically is highlighting a breakthrough in potential of our measure of how honest we are in what we're doing, what we're choosing, will bring greater rewards, because Jupiter is at the center of Taurus, the most Taurus that Taurus gets. This can be a day of expanded efficiency, working with what we have more effectively, Or Jupiter may amplify where we are stuck in mental chatter or excessive worrying about what we can't control. That would be the going, like most of us worry excessively about what we can't control, right? So that could be the automatic response versus where can we really just allow more space for what's arising and the efficiency of our minds when we open up the space again, like the feminine, opening up just more availability in my body, even to see what's arising here and see what I can do with this day, with this energy.
So much of that falls back into trust, right?
Mhm.
Trusting that we can't control everything anyways. And if we try to, we're basically saying that our design is better than the design. And usually that's not true. And so there's an element of trusting in the greater design in order to release that impulse to control everything. And
Absolutely.
and meddle in everything. And I think that's part of when we were talking before about the feminine shadow, I think part of that desire to manipulate and control and get our way, quote unquote, is because we don't trust.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
at the end of the day, we don't trust that there is anything other than what we're trying to actually manipulate and control, and that there's no other possibility. Like you said, our attachment to the expectation of how things should be and how they should look just cuts off any other possibilities and makes it so we feel like we have to control everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we're not in touch with our own resources, our own source. And what you said about trust is beautiful because Jupiter can be beliefs, but it's also faith. Faith and trust are it's like we need faith in order to trust. Faith in what I cannot know. Faith in the fact that there, like you beautifully said, there is an intelligence that we are a part of, but generally we don't open up to it unless we really practice doing that, which requires faith and trust. And the more we do that, and the more we discover that even if we stumble and we pick ourselves back up, if we focus on that we stumbled rather than that we're picking ourselves back up, which we tend to do, it's like we have a whole new opportunity when we have to develop a trust in ourselves to pick ourselves back up, which gives us more faith in doing it again, in continuing to make new choices, in continuing to choose where I haven't known before. It builds on itself. It's a muscle that we need to work.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Saturday, August 19th, the Virgo moon applies to a trine with Pluto retrograde, and Ceres in Libra opposes Chiron retrograde in Aries, and the sun trines Eris and the North Node. This is also the day of Venus's archetypal heliacal rise. So it's going to be different technically for everybody on the planet, depending on your latitude, depending on your visibility. But an archetypal way, collectively, this is when Venus first becomes visible as a morning star. She's been invisible for the last 10 days or so, or how archetypally, in moving from the Capricorn cycle now into the Leo cycle. So she's birthing. Our feminine is birthing now in this new Leo cycle. So this celestial setup is an invitation to initiate or birth a new perspective or inner orientation to the evolutionary intention of tension. This is where this is really coming from. So as we talked about before, Amanda, something can be tense because we are being directly confronted with something, which is an opposition, which we don't want to see or acknowledge. So I read this whole configuration as providing the space to explore ways and do whatever it takes to explore the ways we do whatever it takes to avoid meeting ourselves nakedly and directly, and where we might be ready for more self-honesty and accuracy in service to true empowerment. And that is freedom. So as you beautifully articulated before, some of the ways in which we avoid the truth in front of us is we blame, or we dissociate, or we loop in our minds, or we self-medicate, whatever that might be, food, alcohol, drugs, whatever. So again, this doesn't make us wrong. It's when we take stock of what we're doing, it's taking an honest accounting of where I am. And it's going to hurt because we get to. But sometimes we have to feel how much we've been shoulding ourselves, comparing ourselves with how society, our parents, our own expectations have set us up for success, but it's really setting ourselves up for failure in a sense. And that's the tension that we live with. It's the tension of what I want for me and where I'm really at. And if we're more honest with where I really am at, that's an act of love. And that releases some of the tension because it comes back to the fundamental of what is in my experience right here, right now. This basics, as you and I keep talking about. So the trines here that are happening between the luminaries and these powerful transformers, Eris and Pluto, provide a safe space for this type of exploration, especially today. So I highly recommend taking some time because this is just a very self-empowering way to just be gentle with ourselves and explore, where is my center? Do I know where my center is? If I don't, perfect. The honest expression of I don't know where my center is might drop you into your center. And if it doesn't, then you can say, okay, well, this moment of lucidity and honesty it might not feel it, but it's developing a faith in my capacity to just trust where I am is enough. And so on Sunday, August 20th, the sun is at the apex of this yod, and Neptune retrograde and Pluto retrograde are at the bottom. And I love Christopher Renstrom's recent podcast on the yod, which is great. And the moon conjunct Ceres opposing Chiron retrograde. So we're going to feel more tension acutely today, probably, as the moon gets involved with the Ceres Chiron retrograde aspect that I mentioned from the day before. The moon is now birthing into form. So in this part of the lunar cycle, the new moon is now becoming visible, much like Venus. So this entire configuration can be another initial exposing of maybe where we're being confronted with a reality that we don't like. And not having to like things is perfectly okay. We don't have to put a good face on. We don't have to give ourselves affirmations and want things to be different. If things are the way they are, again, the honest recognition of I don't like it is being honest. And being honest is freaking feels good. Even if what is happening doesn't feel good, the honesty of being transparent with myself, I know in my experience when I practice this, I recognize, wow, it feels better to be honest with me, even if it's like, and sometimes I grieve. Sometimes it literally is open as my heart and I have to grieve. But it feels like a good grieving. It feels like a righteous grieving, not a righteous, like self-righteous, but an honesty. And honesty is literally the mode to truth. So the cyclical nature of life guarantees we are shown the truth in myriad ways over and over again, like we talked about before, until we are ready to see it or experience it nakedly. We have more opportunities. I'm not one to wait any longer. I used to be. I like to kind of lean in now to opportunities to see where I am not in relationship with aspects of me yet, where I might be available now, and then back off if I discover I'm not, and let that be. But that way I am participating in my own evolutionary choices. I'm not just a victim of circumstance or waiting for challenges to happen to make something happen, because oftentimes we might feel like we're behind the eight ball when challenges happen, unless we are somehow gently making it a practice in our daily life, however it looks like for us, to get in touch with more of our center, right?
Andrea, how do you do that when other people are involved? So when the impact of your assessment that you're not totally in your truth or you're not totally in alignment, if that will have impact on other people, how do you navigate that without prematurely blowing up things or without, taking into account other people's needs and desires and realities?
Great question. If I'm understanding you correctly, do you mean like when I realize that I've been out of alignment in a particular way, how do I then be honest with other people around that? Or how do I then?
Well, especially when it will directly impact them. You know, maybe you're in a relationship, maybe you're doing something with people in your life that you agreed to, maybe even at one point.
Yeah.
And now you're like, oh, shoot, this doesn't work for me anymore. And how do we do this with compassion for the impact that our quote unquote truth may have on somebody else's comfort zone, reality, needs, expectations, all those things?
That's a big question. I'm in a place right now, actually, where I'm discovering more of my style of relating is not what I thought it was.
Mm.
And so I have some very intimate friends that I'm just doing me and being me, but they're seeing it as I'm distancing myself. But for me, I'm recognizing how much I have needed to maintain a certain way of relating with them that's really just reifying a false safety that's not really in alignment with who either of us really, really are. And so my loving me and my own way of being me, this is a hard thing to say, but it's not our job to make everybody okay. That's something that we tend to do too. But if we're doing that from a place of social expectation or habit, where we just don't like to be uncomfortable when things are changing, that's normal. And that's why it takes so much self-love to be like willing to stay in what's true. Now, I still reach out to my friends in these particular people when I feel called to. And sometimes I will choose to make an effort to reach out in a way that is the old way of doing it, because I just want to, and I'm choosing it. But I'm not defaulting to a particular way of relating anymore. That's just habit, because it doesn't feel good in my body. It feels disempowering. It feels like just maintaining a loop in something that is not really an integrity, and it's not really me loving them. I'm still their friend, but it's just like this is Venus. Venus is relationships. So when I talked earlier about, we might discover when we find more of ourselves in our center, how much of our relationships have been built on or based on feelings of lack that we can't substantiate ourselves, and that we're not be able to be honest in relationship with others because there are these implicit rules, social rules or expectations of how we should be. And it's going to be bumpy, but the North Node is now in Aries, and it's not all about me. It's just when we are choosing ourselves authentically, or even just trying and failing and then having to come back and like readjust, which is necessary too, then we're elevating the Libra. When we reach toward the North Node in authentic ways, then the South Node energies get purified and cleansed. So then our availability to be in relationship with other people is clear. It's more honest. There aren't so many entanglements anymore. It's cleaner and it feels better. It takes a period. That's the in-between period. Can we stay in that place of composting? Composting the old before we get to the new. That's the place it's harder to be in.
Yeah. And so many of the things we brought up today, the gentleness,
Yeah,
the understanding that we're going to make mistakes, and it's not always going to be pretty, and it's going to, there's a bumpy road, but that ultimately there is more ability to have true, clear, authentic, truly honoring relationships with other people. And it could be the same people that we're in relationship right now, but there has to be a period of like restructuring or reorienting before we can get there. Right.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. I mean,
You're
it's just
so welcome.
like if it's just us, it's like kind of easy, but there's other people involved usually in all the different things that we're doing, right?
Yes. And there's the pull for connection, which is endogenous to relating as a human being. Where are we relating from? If it's not in real coherence, then it's still feeding somewhere in us blame, resentment. That's the thing. That is, if we're doing it from habit or from social convention, it's not coming from this more honest place. It just perpetuates the shadow, the negative female shadow.
Yeah. And it's eating that other wolf.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Whew. Okay. Always so deep with you, Andrea. It's like, we're not going to just have some surface level little conversation. It's always going to go there, which is great. I love it. I hope that you all do too. Okay. A couple things for all of you. Number one, we have it's our fall workshop series. It's coming up soon. It's centered around the ideas of how astrology can help you with your health and well-being. Judith Hill is going to be teaching that portion of the workshop series, how astrology can help us with our financial well-being, our wealth, our career, those types of choices that we're making. And Georgia Stathis is going to be teaching that aspect of the workshop. And then how we can use astrology to experience true fulfillment. And we've been having lots of conversations on the platform lately about how we're only really fulfilled when we are walking our unique path. And astrology offers so much for that. And Michael Bryan is going to be teaching that. So it's an amazing series that's coming up. You're all invited. You can go to astrologyhub.com/workshop to find out more about that. And you can opt in for just you can opt in for like one of those specific teachers, or you can do the whole series. So if you know you just want to do the whole series, you can do that. There is a bundle. Or you can just go, oh God, that one with Judith sounds amazing. I just want to do that. Or with Georgia or with Michael. So that's coming up here in September, and would love to have you join us for that. And then also Andrea Michelle is available on the Astrologer Connect platform. She's an incredible astrologer to have personal readings with if you want her to look at your chart, to help you work through some of these issues. If you like her unique perspective, she's amazing. You can go to astrologyhub.com/Andrea Connect and book a reading directly with her. Or if you just want to check out all the astrologers that we have on the platform, you go to astrologyhub.com/connect, read about them all, see who really resonates with you, or take our matchmaking quiz, which will help us connect you with the right astrologer based on your question and based on who you are. So we ask you some questions to help us identify that, and then we make a recommendation for the best astrologer for you. So that is all happening here coming up soon. Andrea, I am so grateful for your continued presence here for our astrology this week. And thank you for all that wisdom that you just shared with us.
Oh, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for this continuation of the months. It's been really a joy.
Yes, for me too. Thanks all of you for being here. Thank you so much for being a part of our community. And thank you as always for making astrology a part of your life. We'll catch you on the next episode.